Stay awake. You can hate me tomorrow. Tonight you survive. Those were the first words Madison Hayes heard from the man crouching over her. In the rain, a man wearing a Hell's Angels patch on his chest, his hands already pressed against her wound, voice steady in a way that made no sense, given everything she'd been taught about men like him. She reached for her weapon. He didn't flinch. He just looked at her calm, certain, and said it again. Tonight you survive. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and follow this story with me all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Logan Whitmore had not planned to be anyone's hero that night. He had not planned anything, really. That was the whole point of riding alone after midnight on a highway that most people avoided even in daylight. The kind of road that existed between towns, but didn't belong to either one, just asphalt and darkness, and the sound of his engine keeping him company when the silence in his own head got too loud. He rode because it was the only thing that still worked. The only thing that quieted the part of him that had never quite come home from the wars he'd fought, the losses he'd carried, the years that had passed like weather he'd survived but never fully understood. He wasn't thinking about any of that when he saw the lights. He almost didn't see them at all. They were off the road, down near the base of the old bridge that crossed Miller Creek, partially hidden by the embankment. Blue and red, still cycling, like the vehicle hadn't given up yet, even though everything around it had. Logan slowed without consciously deciding to. Eyes registered the scene before his brain had processed what it meant: a police SUV, crumpled on the driver's side, the front end destroyed, emergency lights still rotating like they were trying to wave someone down. He stopped. He sat there on his bike for a moment, engine idling, and did what any reasonable man with his history would do. He thought about leaving. He thought about it seriously, turned it over in his mind the way a man turns over a stone he already knows has something bad underneath, methodically, knowing the outcome, doing it anyway just to be sure. He stopped. There would be questions. There were always questions when a man with a Hell's Angels patch showed up near a police vehicle. There would be assumptions, suspicion, the entire machinery of distrust that had followed him like a shadow since he'd first put on the vest. He knew exactly how that story ended. He got off the bike. He didn't make a speech about it. He didn't wrestle with his conscience for another 30 seconds. He just swung his leg over, set the kickstand, and walked toward the wreck because he'd seen emergency lights and a wrecked vehicle, and that was enough. Some things bypassed the thinking part of the brain entirely and went straight to the part that was still a Marine. The rain was already soaking through his flannel shirt by the time he reached the embankment. He could hear the radio dispatch still calling, still asking for Unit 12 to respond, the voice on the other end getting slightly more urgent with each repetition, the kind of urgency that meant someone on that end already knew something was wrong but hadn't confirmed it yet. The driver's side door was crushed inward, the windshield was gone, and there was blood, not a little blood, enough blood to mean something serious had happened before the crash, not because of it. He moved around the vehicle. That's when he heard her. Not words exactly. More like a sound a person makes when they're trying very hard not to make any sound at all, controlled, deliberate breathing through clenched teeth, the kind of breathing that takes concentration. That means the person doing it is fighting against something and winning by a narrow margin. Followed the sound around to the passenger side, which had been forced open, and found her. She was on the ground, maybe 15 feet from the vehicle. She had crawled that far and then stopped. And Logan understood in an instant why she'd stopped. She'd been trying to get to cover, or to the road, or somewhere other than where she'd started. But her body had made a different decision than her mind. She was on her stomach, one hand pressed flat against the gravel, the other pressed against her side. Her uniform was dark with rain and darker with blood. Her hat was gone. Her blonde hair was plastered to the side of her face. She was younger than Logan had expected somehow, even though he hadn't known what to expect. She was watching him. The moment he came around the vehicle, the moment he stepped into the range of her vision, her eyes locked onto him with an intensity that startled him. They weren't the eyes of someone fading out. They were sharp, alert, burning with something that was equal parts fear and fury and determination. And before Logan had taken 2 more steps, her hand had moved from the gravel to her holster. Her weapon cleared leather on pure reflex. Her arms shook with the effort of holding it up, but she held it. Don't, she said. Her voice was tight, controlled. She was rationing her energy. Don't come any closer. Logan stopped. He was 10 feet away from her. He could see the gun was a Glock 22, standard Montana Highway Patrol issue. He could see that her hand was steady enough. He could see that she meant it. Raise both hands, slow, deliberate. All the way up, palms out, the universal signal that needed no translation in any language or between any two people, regardless of what patches either of them wore. I'm not here to hurt you, he said. I'm here because you're still alive. Silence between them, except for the rain and the radio calling for Unit 12, and the creek moving fast below the bridge. Your radio's out, he said. Dispatch has been calling for about 4 minutes. Nobody's coming yet. Her eyes didn't leave him, but she didn't fire. I'm going to reach into my left jacket pocket, Logan said, keeping his voice exactly level, the way he'd learned to keep it in situations where one wrong note could change everything, and take out my phone. Going to call 911. That's all. Why, she said. The question was sharp. Not why are you calling 911, why are you here? Why did you stop? Why aren't you already gone? Because you're still alive, he said again. I already told you that part. She watched him for another 3 seconds, counted. Then her arm dropped, not because she'd given up the gun, not because she trusted him, but because her body made the choice for her. The arm dropped and she gasped one short, sharp sound, and Logan was already moving before the sound finished. She brought the gun back up. Stop, you're bleeding through your hand, he said, stopping again immediately, still 6 feet away. Whatever you're pressing on, it's not enough. You've got maybe 20 minutes before that becomes a problem that nobody can fix. 2 tours, he said. Iraq and Afghanistan. I know what a field wound looks like when it needs a compress, and I know what one looks like when it's past that point. Yours is still at the first kind, but not for long. Another silence. The radio kept calling. Dispatch was getting more urgent. Madison Hayes looked at Logan Whitmore, at his hands still raised, at the Hell's Angels patch on his vest, the expression on his face that she didn't have a category for, because it wasn't what she'd been trained to expect from a man in that vest on a road like this at midnight, and she made a calculation. Don't touch the gun, she said. I won't. Don't touch my radio. I won't. I know, he said. If I do anything that isn't exactly what I just said I was going to do, you shoot me. That's fair. Now let me call this in and then let me look at that wound. Took the phone out. He called 911. He told the dispatcher there was an officer down at Miller Creek Bridge, that he needed ambulance and police presence, that he was a civilian who had stopped at the scene. He gave his name when asked. He spelled it out. He gave his description. SEAL, he says. He was wearing an Angel's vest because he knew the dispatcher needed that information, and because he'd learned a long time ago that hiding things from people who needed them was always more expensive than just saying the truth. He ended the call and put the phone back in his pocket. Then he looked at Madison. Okay, she said. Her voice was slightly less tight now, not because she trusted him, he understood that, because she was losing the fight to keep herself upright and her options had narrowed. Okay, look at it. He moved slowly, deliberately. He kept his hands visible. He crouched down beside her, and she watched him the entire time, and he didn't comment on that, didn't ask her to relax or tell her she was safe, because she wasn't safe, and he wasn't going to lie to her about it. He moved her hand away from her side. He'd seen worse. He'd also seen things that looked like what hers looked like that turned out to be much, much worse than they appeared. The wound was on her left side, between the lower ribs and the hip. He needed more light. He pulled his phone back out and used the flashlight, and what he saw made him set his jaw and reach for the hem of his flannel shirt. What are you doing? She said immediately, making a compress. My jacket's too thick. The shirt works better. He pulled the flannel shirt off over his head, leaving just his t-shirt, and started working it into a folded pad. You've been shot, he said. Not a question. She already knew. And then the vehicle went off the road. That happened after, not before. How did the impact pattern on the driver's side? You went off-road at speed, but there was no brake engagement. Either you couldn't brake or you were already compromised when it happened. He met her eyes. Someone shot you, and then your car went off the road. Those are 2 different events. Her expression changed, not the part that was watching him for sudden movement. That part stayed exactly where it was. But something behind her eyes shifted, something that looked like recognition, and then something that looked like fear of a different quality than the fear that had been there before. Not immediate fear, the kind that came from understanding something about your situation that you hadn't fully processed yet. Easy, Logan said without touching her. Stay with me. Keep your eyes on me. I need to, she started. You need to stay still, and let me put this compress in place, and then you need to stay awake until that ambulance gets here. That's the entire plan for the next 15 minutes. Everything else happens after. You don't understand. Tell me, he said. She looked at him. Rain hit the gravel between them. The radio kept calling for Unit 12. Now with a different voice on the other end, someone who'd been pulled in to repeat the call because the original dispatcher had escalated it. The call, she said finally, the call that sent me out here, came through official channels. It was, she stopped, pressed her lips together. He could see her deciding something. It was real, she said. Officially, dispatch had it logged. Backup was supposed to meet me here, and backup didn't come. Backup didn't come, she said. And then another stop. And then my radio went out. Not bad signal. It just stopped, like it had been cut. Logan was quiet for a moment. How long ago did you get the call, he said. 40 minutes. 40 minutes, he let that sit. 40 minutes meant whoever had done this had been patient, planned it, had known she would be alone out here for long enough, that the outcome was supposed to be settled before anyone came looking. Is there anything in your vehicle? Documents, evidence, anything you were carrying tonight? Jaw tightened. That was all the answer he needed. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, that changes some things. What does it change? It means whoever did this might not be done. The words landed in the silence between them and Madison's hand, moved back toward her weapon, not pointing it at him this time, just finding it the way a person finds a familiar object in the dark. Logan noticed the movement. He didn't react to it. The ambulance will be here in. He checked the time on his phone, did the math. Rural Montana, the nearest station, the road conditions. 12 minutes, maybe 15. That's assuming they push it. 15 minutes, she repeated. The tone wasn't panic, it was arithmetic. You're going to be fine, he said. The compress is holding. You just have to stay awake. Stop telling me what I have to do. He almost smiled. All right, what's your name, she said. Logan. What? Whitmore. She looked at the patch on his vest, then back at his face. You're really a Hell's Angel. I'm really a Marine who rides motorcycles, he said. The club is a separate category. That's not what the briefings say. What do the briefings say? She looked at him for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, though pain flashed across her face, with the movement, the corner of her mouth did something that in different circumstances might have been a wry expression. That men with that patch are to be treated as high-risk contacts until otherwise determined. That's not wrong, Logan said. To be fair, you're not helping yourself. I'm helping you, he said. Helping myself is a different conversation for a different night. She was quiet for a moment. Her breathing had steadied slightly with the compress in place. Still too fast, still too shallow, but better than 2 minutes ago. Logan kept his eyes moving between her face and the road above them and the tree line on either side. He wasn't being subtle about it, Madison noticed. You're watching for something, she said. I'm watching for everything, he said. That's different. You think they're still out here? I think whoever planned this planned it carefully, he said. I think a careful plan accounts for loose ends. Madison looked at him for a long moment. She was pale from blood loss and wet from the rain, and she looked like she was fighting for every clear thought. And even so, even through all of that, Logan could see her working through it, checking his logic, running it against what she knew, deciding. There's a case file, she said, in my vehicle, the door panel. I'm not going to get it, he said immediately. I'm not leaving you alone, and I'm not touching evidence from a potential crime scene. She stopped. It's not official, it's personal research. Papers. I'd been looking into something on my own time. Kind of something. She looked at the tree line the way he'd been looking at it, not seeing anything specific, just the action of someone reminding themselves to be careful. Dispatch irregularities, she said. Officers being sent to wrong locations. Emergency calls that turned out to be fabricated. 3 incidents in the last 8 months, she paused, all involving female officers working rural routes. None of them were supposed to look connected. Logan was still. How many of the other officers were okay, he said. Madison didn't answer immediately. One was, she said. The other two are still on medical leave. The rain came down harder for a moment, then steadied. And you told someone about this research? Jaw tightened again. I filed a preliminary report, she said, 3 weeks ago, to my supervising commander. Logan looked at her. She looked at him, and between them in the rain, in the dark, next to a wrecked police vehicle at a bridge where backup had never arrived, the shape of the thing took form. Neither of them said it out loud. They didn't need to. 12 minutes, Logan said. He adjusted the compress. You're still doing fine. Stay awake. I am awake. Keep it that way. Why do you care, she said. Not hostility, genuine question. The kind someone asks when they're too exhausted and in too much pain to dress it up in social convention. Just the raw fact of the question laid out flat. Why did you stop? You had to know what it would look like. Logan thought about several answers. He discarded most of them because they were either too much or not enough, and settled on the one that happened to be true. Because leaving someone who needed help was never something I was able to do, he said. Tried a few times. Doesn't take. That sounds like something someone would say. Probably, he said. Doesn't make it less true. She studied him with those sharp eyes that hadn't gone soft even with blood loss and shock and 15 minutes of rain. What if I told someone you assaulted me? What if I said you caused this? Then I'd go to jail, he said simply, and I'd still be glad I stopped. That silenced her. Not because the answer was what she expected. Clearly it wasn't. Because it was the kind of answer that required her to do something she'd been trained not to do in situations like this, which was believe it. You're either very honest or very stupid, she said. My ex-wife said the same thing, Logan said, in that order. Madison made a sound that might have been a short laugh and immediately regretted it as pain cut through the sound. Her hand pressed harder on the compress over his. Logan moved his hand to cover hers, steadying the pressure, and she didn't pull away. Stay still, he said. I'm trying. Logan. Yeah. Don't leave. She said it without drama, without embarrassment. The same way she said everything, straight, clear, counting every word because she could only afford a certain number of them. Till they get here. Don't leave. I won't, he said. He meant it the same way she'd said it. Straight, clear, no performance. Overhead, somewhere above the rain and the running creek and the still calling radio, a sound was beginning to build sirens, distant but approaching, cutting through the Montana night with the particular insistence of vehicles being driven very fast by people who already knew they were late. Madison exhaled slowly. 8 minutes, Logan said, checking his phone. Give or take. You counted down from 12. Yes. That's either very reassuring or very unsettling. Probably both, he said. Just like everything else tonight. She almost smiled again. It lasted half a second and then pain took it back, but it had been their real brief belonging entirely to her. Logan filed it away somewhere without examining it. When they get here, she said. Yes, they're going to assume. I know what they're going to assume, he said. That's okay. It's not okay, she said sharply. You saved my life and they're going to put you on the ground. Probably, he said. That's not. She stopped. That's not right. No, he agreed. It isn't. But it's what's going to happen. So before they get here, I need you to do something. What? Remember every detail of tonight, he said. Starting from the call you got. Every detail. Don't let shock take any of it. Hold on to it. Why are you? Because your memory is going to be the most important thing in the next 48 hours, he said. Not mine. Yours, they'll discount mine. They have to. Yours, he looked at her. Yours is what breaks this open or keeps it closed. She was quiet for a moment, thinking, processing. You already know you're going to be blamed, she said slowly. It's the simplest story, he said. Hell's Angel, wounded cop, middle of nowhere. Writes itself. And you stopped anyway. Yes. Even knowing, yes, she looked at him for a long time. The sirens were louder now, close enough to see the color of them against the cloud cover. Red and white washing across the low sky. I'm going to tell them the truth, she said. I know you will, Logan said. You sound very certain about that for a man you just met. I am certain, he said. You're the kind of person who files preliminary reports on things nobody else wants to notice. Don't lie about things that matter. Another half second of something on her face. This time not quite a smile. You don't know me, she said. Not yet, Logan Whitmore said quietly. And then the first police cruiser crested the embankment above them, its spotlight swinging down, catching him full in the face, kneeling in the rain, Hell's Angels patch visible on his chest, both hands pressed over a wounded officer's side. He heard the doors open. He heard boots hit gravel. He heard the shouts beginning the commands, sharp and professional and entirely expected, and he raised his hands again, both of them, all the way up, and he didn't move another inch. "Stay with me," he said to Madison, one last time before the officers reached him. "I'm here," she said. "Good," he said. "That's the whole point." Then the hands were on him, pulling him back from her, and the world became the familiar geometry of concrete compliance: knees, hands, cheek against gravel, and he went with it without resistance, without anger, without any of the things they probably expected from a man in his vest on a road like this. Just kept breathing, slow, steady, the same way he'd asked her to breathe. While the officers secured him and the paramedics reached Madison, and the whole terrible machine of assumption and procedure churned into motion around him, Logan Whitmore stared at the gravel 6 inches from his face and told himself the same thing he'd told her. "Stay awake, you can face what comes next." Tonight she survived. Somewhere in that machinery of confusion and shouting and radios and rain, a single thought was already taking root in the mind of one Detective Aaron Callahan, who had arrived in the second vehicle and stood apart from the others, watching the scene with 20 years of trained eyes, and the slow, uncomfortable feeling that something about this picture was not what his colleagues already believed it was. He watched Logan. He watched the wound. He watched the compress made from a flannel shirt. He watched the way an officer named Hayes was trying to turn her head toward the man being put in handcuffs, trying to say something that the paramedics were gently but firmly preventing her from saying. Aaron Callahan took out his notebook. He wrote down the time. He wrote down what he saw, and he drew a line under it and wrote 3 words that would begin to unravel everything. Something doesn't fit. The next 12 hours would change every assumption anyone in that department had made about the man face down in the gravel. That was 12 hours away. Right now, there was only the rain and the sirens and a wounded woman being lifted onto a stretcher and a man in handcuffs who had stopped when nobody else would. That was enough. For now, that was everything. The interrogation room at Cascade County Sheriff's substation smelled like burnt coffee and old decisions. Logan had been in rooms like this before, not many, but enough to know the rhythm of them. You sit, you wait. The waiting is part of the process, designed to make you feel the weight of where you are, to let the silence do work that questions haven't started yet. Logan sat with hands folded on the table in front of him, his wrists still faintly red from the cuffs, and he waited without visible distress because he had waited in worse places for higher stakes, and the skill had never left him. He'd taken his vest at booking. Standard procedure, they said. He hadn't argued. But the absence of it sat on his shoulders in a specific way, not shame, not anger, just the particular awareness of something removed that had been part of how he moved through the world for a long time. Vest meant things to different people. To his chapter, it meant brotherhood and history, and a code that outsiders almost always misread. To law enforcement, meant danger, by default, before a single word was exchanged. To Logan, right now in this room, it meant a complication he'd accepted the moment he'd gotten off his bike at that bridge. He'd made his one phone call. Not a lawyer, he didn't have one on speed dial, and the public defender would take hours. Called Reese. Reese Calloway was his chapter president, a man who had been a combat medic in Fallujah before he was anything else, and whose first response to Logan's situation had been 4 seconds of complete silence followed by, "Are you hurt?" "No," Logan said. "Is she alive?" "She was when they put her in the ambulance." Another pause. "Had." "Okay," Reese said, and Logan could hear the shift in his voice, the transition from personal to operational, the same shift he'd heard in command tents a long time ago, when someone crossed from receiving information to making decisions. "Stay quiet, don't explain yourself, don't apologize. I'll make some calls." I know," Reese said. "I know you did the right thing. Do it later. Right now, just sit there and be boring." Logan had almost smiled. Copy that. That had been 2 hours ago. Now the door opened, and the man who came in wasn't what Logan expected. He'd expected impatience, aggression, the particular energy of officers who'd already written the story in their heads and needed the interview to confirm it. What he got instead was a man in his early 50s who moved with the careful economy of someone who had learned not to waste motion, who carried a notebook and a gas station coffee cup, who sat down across from Logan and spent the first 30 seconds just looking at him without speaking. Logan looked back. Aaron Callahan, the man said finally, detective, violent crimes and organized affairs. Logan Whitmore. I know who you are, Callahan said, not hostile factual. I know your record. I know your chapter. Been aware of your MC for about 6 years. He set his coffee cup down. I also watched you bleed for 40 minutes trying to keep a young officer alive before my colleagues put you on the ground. Logan said nothing. That's not nothing, Callahan said. I want you to understand that I know that's not nothing. He opened his notebook. Tell me about tonight. From the beginning. Every detail. So Logan told him. He didn't abbreviate, didn't editorialize, didn't try to make himself sound better than the facts already made him. Started with the road and the lights and the decision to stop. And he walked Callahan through every moment in the order they happened, including the things that didn't make him look good, the hesitation, the thought about leaving, the moment he'd considered all the ways this exact situation could go wrong for him. He included those things because Callahan was the kind of man who would notice their absence if he left them out, and a story that was too clean was its own kind of problem. Callahan listened without interrupting. He took notes in a handwriting that Logan couldn't read upside down. When Logan finished, Callahan was quiet for a moment. She told you about dispatch irregularities, Callahan said. Yes, she told you she'd filed a preliminary report. Yes, to her supervising commander. Logan watched Callahan's face. He'd been watching it throughout the interview because 20 years in the military train and 12 years riding with men who'd been to war had given him a well-calibrated ability to read the difference between someone performing neutrality and someone who was genuinely processing. Callahan was doing neither. He was doing something more specific. He was deciding how much he already knew that he hadn't said yet. What is it? Logan said. Callahan looked up from his notebook. It didn't ask a question, Logan said. I'm asking you one. What do you already know that made you come in here yourself instead of sending someone? A long pause. Callahan picked up his coffee cup, looked at it, set it back down without drinking. Officer Hayes is out of surgery, he said. Logan let out a breath. One single quiet exhale. She's stable, Callahan continued. She's asking to speak with me. Specifically me. She was fairly insistent about that, apparently, even coming out of anesthesia. A beat. She was also apparently insistent that you not be charged with anything, which is making some of my colleagues uncomfortable because the easier narrative is currently losing its witness. The easier narrative, Logan repeated. You know what it is, Callahan said. Don't need to draw it. No, Logan agreed. You don't. Callahan leaned back in his chair. He looked at Logan the way men look at things they haven't fully decided about yet, with attention rather than judgment, with the specific quality of someone who knows that what he decides next matters and is taking that seriously. The flannel shirt, Callahan said. What about it? Compress you made. The paramedic said it was applied with knowledge of the wound location and pressure requirements. They said if it hadn't been there, she would have bled out before the ambulance arrived. He paused. Where'd you learn that? Medicine Marines. 2 tours, Iraq and then Helmand Province. Callahan wrote something. Discharge status? Honorable. I can give you my service number if that helps. Helps, Callahan said. He looked at the notebook, then at Logan. I'm going to tell you something that I probably shouldn't tell you at this stage of an investigation. Logan waited. Officer Hayes is the 3rd female officer on a rural route to be injured in the last 8 months in this county, Callahan said. The first 2 were classified as accidents. Nobody connected them formally. He stopped. Connected them 6 weeks ago. I've been working it quietly because the moment it becomes official, certain people in certain positions get nervous. Nervous people make mistakes or... He paused carefully. They make decisions. The room was very quiet. She filed a report, Logan said. She filed a report to her commander. To her commander, Callahan said. 3 weeks later, she's at the bottom of an embankment at Miller Creek. Neither of them said the word that was hanging in the air between them. They didn't need to. The shape of it was already fully formed, and naming it would only make it official before Callahan was ready to make it official, and a man like Callahan clearly understood that timing was everything. What happens now, Logan said. Now Callahan said I go talk to Officer Hayes. He closed the notebook. You stay exactly where you are and you do not speak to anyone, including my colleagues, until I come back. How long? Depends on what she says. And if she says something that changes the situation, Callahan stood up. He picked up his coffee and his notebook. The door he stopped without turning around. You made a flannel shirt compress in a rainstorm at midnight for a woman who had her weapon pointed at you, he said. My experience, that's either the act of a very dangerous man or a very decent one. He pushed the door open. Been doing this 20 years. I'm getting better at telling the difference. The door closed. Logan sat in the empty room and breathed. 30 feet down the hall, in a room with better furniture and a closed door, Aaron Callahan sat down beside a hospital bed that had been moved in from the county medical facility, a temporary measure, concession to the fact that Madison Hayes had woken up from surgery asking questions instead of resting, and the attending physician had ultimately agreed that keeping her calm was medically preferable to keeping her immobile. She looked worse than she had at the bridge. That was the strange thing about hospitals. They'd clean people up and dress their wounds and hook them to monitors, and somehow the result was that they looked more fragile than they had in the field, where the urgency of survival gave a person a kind of terrible brightness. Mattis looked pale in the fluorescent light, with an IV in her left arm and her right hand free, resting on top of the blanket with the specific stillness of someone conserving every unit of energy. But her eyes were the same, clear, sharp, burning with the same mixture of determination and anger that had held a weapon steady in a rainstorm. You're Callahan, she said before he sat down. I am. He told me about you, she said. Logan. He said you wrote something in your notebook at the scene. Callahan raised an eyebrow slightly. He saw that? He notices things, she said. I don't think he stops noticing things. It's not an on-off switch for him. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at him. Is he still here? He's in an interview room. He hasn't been charged? Not yet. Not ever, she said, with a flatness that left no room for nuance. He didn't do anything except save my life. If someone in this building charges him with anything, I will be the most difficult witness they have ever encountered in their career. Understood, Callahan said. He sat down. He opened his notebook to a fresh page. Tell me about the call. Madison told him. She told him everything she had told Logan, and then more details she hadn't shared in the rain, because the rain wasn't the right place for them, because some information needed walls and a person with authority and a notebook before it could be said. She told him about the 3 incidents she'd researched. She told him about the dispatch records she'd requested and cross-referenced on her own time. She told him about the patterns. She told him about the patterns, just that female officers on rural routes were being injured, but that the calls sending them to those locations shared specific characteristics. They came through the same dispatch channel. They were logged at the same stage of a shift when oversight was thinner. The backup that was supposed to respond to those calls consistently failed to materialize, not because of distance or availability, but because the backup assignments were modified in the system between the time of dispatch and the time of arrival. Someone with access to the dispatch system was changing the records after the fact. Callahan's pen had slowed while she spoke. Not stopped still moving, but with the deliberate care of someone writing things he intended to read very carefully later. The name, he said quietly. Madison looked at it. The report you filed, he said. The preliminary. You gave it to your supervising commander. What's the name? Pause. Not hesitation, something more specific. The pause of someone who has known for 3 weeks what they were sitting on and has been waiting for the right moment to set it down. Commander Gerald Marsh, she said. Callahan wrote it down. He wrote it in the middle of a fresh page with space around it, the way you write a name when you want to look at it clearly, without other words crowding it. How long has Marsh been your commander, he said. 2 years. Did he acknowledge the report? He called me into his office the next morning, Madison said. He told me I was overreaching, that the incidents I'd referenced were unrelated, that I was pattern matching because I was anxious about rural assignments, and that if I needed support resources, the department provided them. She paused. Said it the way you say something to make a person feel small enough to stop. Did you stop? I kept a copy of the report, she said. I kept researching. Quietly. Where's the copy? My apartment. in a waterproof folder in the kitchen cabinet behind the soup. The corner of Callahan's mouth moved in something that under different circumstances would have been appreciation. You hid it behind the soup. Nobody looks behind the soup, she said simply. He looked at her for a moment. Then, the case file in your vehicle. The personal research papers Logan mentioned. In the driver's side door panel, she said, everything I've compiled in the last 3 weeks. The correlations between the dispatch records, the personnel schedules, the incident reports. All of it. She looked directly at him. If Commander Marsh has any awareness that I was still looking, those papers are the thing he'd want removed from that vehicle. Callahan closed his notebook. He stood up. Aaron, she said. He stopped. How long have you been working this? She said. He looked at her steadily. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, she repeated. Quietly. Yes, because the moment it becomes official, someone gets nervous, he said. Yes. She looked at the ceiling again, breathing carefully the way people breathe when every breath costs something. Someone is already nervous, she said. They were nervous enough to send me to that bridge. She turned her head to look at him directly. Which means they already know about your investigation. Which means someone's watching my investigation, Callahan said. Not a question. The silence between them expanded into something large and cold. Go, she said. Get those papers before someone else does. Callahan was already at the door. He moved through the substation with the specific controlled speed of a man who had understood something and was acting on it before the window closed. Stopped at the front desk, requested the inventory of items recovered from Officer Hayes' vehicle, and stood waiting with the stillness of someone who has learned to look patient when they're not. Inventory took 4 minutes. When it came back, he scanned it with his finger. The driver's side door panel contents, standard issue items, pen registration, insurance form, evidence tape, no papers. He stood very still for a moment. Then he went back to Logan's interview room and opened the door without knocking. Logan looked up. The papers from her vehicle, Callahan said. They're gone. Logan said nothing, but something in his expression changed, not surprise. The specific expression of a man whose estimate of a situation has just been confirmed at the worst possible end of the range he'd been considering. How long was the vehicle unattended before your team secured it? Logan asked. Estimated 22 minutes between my first cruiser arriving and forensics getting on scene, Callahan said. 22 minutes, Logan said. Yes. In those 22 minutes, who had access to the vehicle? Callahan looked at him. Responding officers. Who was first on scene besides you? Pause. Henderson and Vic, both assigned to Marsh's division. The name landed in the room and didn't move. Logan leaned back in his chair. He looked at Callahan with the same careful steadiness. Callahan had been looking at him with all night, the mutual recognition of two men who'd each spent a significant portion of their lives operating in environments where reading a situation correctly before acting was the difference between good outcomes and catastrophic ones. You need to move fast, Logan said. Whatever your timeline was, cut it in half. I know. And you need to think about who else in this building knows what you're working. Callahan's jaw tightened slightly. I know, he said again. Is there anyone you're certain of? A long pause. The kind of pause that meant Callahan was running a mental list and subjecting each name on it to a rapid and uncomfortable reassessment. My partner, he said finally. Diaz. She's been working it with me from the beginning. Then you need to go talk to Diaz, Logan said, right now, before anyone in this building notices that you came back from that interview with something different in your eyes than what you walked in with. Callahan looked at him. You're giving me tactical advice. Giving you the same advice any Marine would give another Marine in a position where the perimeter might already be compromised, Logan said. You don't have to take it. No, Callahan said slowly. I don't. He looked at Logan for another beat. But I'm going. He left. The door stayed open this time, not by accident. Detail Logan noted with the part of his mind that was always noting details, always keeping the account. 50 minutes passed. Logan sat with the open door and the distant sound of a building doing its night shift work phones, footsteps, the hum of equipment, the irregular percussion of doors opening and closing in patterns that told stories to anyone who knew how to read them. He was listening, not for anything specific, just maintaining the awareness, keeping the picture current, the way you did when you were in a situation where information was the difference between understanding what was happening to you and being entirely subject to it. The 50-minute mark, a woman appeared in the doorway. She was mid-40s, compact, with dark hair pulled back, and the look of someone who had been asleep 2 hours ago and was running on anger and coffee. She looked at Logan with an expression that was direct to the point of being almost confrontational, not aggressive. Just the face of someone who had decided there was no time for social preamble. "Detective Maria Diaz," she said. "Aaron's partner. Logan Whitmore, I know who you are." She came in and sat down across from him in the chair Callahan had used. She put both hands flat on the table. "I need you to tell me something honestly." "All right. The research Madison Hayes was doing. She shared details with you tonight at the bridge." "Yes, how much detail?" "The pattern, the dispatch irregularities, the 3 incidents, the report she'd filed and who she'd filed it to." Logan looked at her, enough to understand the shape of it, not enough to prove anything. Diaz looked at her hands on the table, then back up. 3 weeks ago, Aaron filed an internal access request to review dispatch logs from the last 8 months. That request was logged by our department system. She paused. It was logged, and then, according to the record, it was withdrawn. Did Aaron withdraw it? No, Logan was quiet. Someone with system access withdrew it on his behalf, she said. Replaced it in the record with the withdrawal notation. Aaron hadn't kept a separate physical record of the filing. There would be no evidence it had ever been made. She looked at Logan. Whoever we're looking at isn't just operating out in the field. They're in the system. They have access to records, dispatch logs, request databases. They know how to use that access, Logan said. They know how to use it, Diaz confirmed. How many people have that level of system access in this department? Logan said. Diaz looked at him with the expression of someone who knows the answer to a question and doesn't want to say it because saying it is the act that makes it real. Division commanders and above, she said, 4 people. One of whom is Gerald Marsh, Logan said. Diaz said nothing. Detective, Logan said carefully. I'm a Hell's Angel sitting in a room in a police station at 3 in the morning after being pulled off a wounded officer I stopped to help. I have every possible reason to be the wrong person in this conversation. I know that. You know that. He leaned forward slightly. But I also know that whatever is happening in this building, it's accelerating because those papers are already gone from that vehicle. And whoever took them is going to realize very quickly that Madison Hayes is alive and talking. Diaz watched him, which means the next move isn't going to be subtle, Logan said. If you and Callahan don't control the next 36 hours, someone else is going to control them for you. Silence. What would you do, Diaz said tactically. This were your situation. Logan looked at the table for a moment, then at her. Secure the witness first, he said, not just medically, physically. Controlled access, people you've personally vetted. Then lock the physical evidence, what's left of it, under chain of custody that doesn't go through your normal channels. Then you move on Marsh before he knows how much you have. He paused. Right now, he probably thinks the papers were everything. He doesn't know what she told me. He doesn't know what she told Callahan. He's operating on incomplete information, and that's your window. Diaz stared at him for a long moment, you know, she said slowly. For a man who's supposed to be the problem in this story, you're being remarkably helpful. I was never the problem in this story, Logan said quietly. I was just the one who stopped. Diaz stood up. She looked at him for another beat, the assessment of it, the calculation behind her eyes, running fast and coming up with an answer she clearly didn't entirely expect. Then she said, I'm going to make sure the charges against you are suspended pending investigation. Appreciate that. Don't thank me yet. She moved to the door. Marsh has a lot of friends in this building. Tonight might get complicated before it gets simple. It's already complicated, Logan said. Yes, Diaz said. But now at least 2 of us know whose fault that actually is. She paused in the doorway. Stay in this room. Don't talk to anyone else. Anyone who comes through that door who isn't me or Aaron, you don't say a word. Copy that, Logan said. She was gone. Logan sat back. He looked at the ceiling. He thought about Reese, who was probably making calls right now, quiet, careful calls to people who knew people, the kind of network that operated entirely off the radar of anyone who dismissed the men who built it. He thought about Madison Hayes in a hospital bed, 30 feet away, conserving her energy with the precision of a person who had decided she was going to need every unit of it in the coming days. Thought about Aaron Callahan, somewhere in this building, running a list of 4 names in his head and arriving at the one that made every other piece of the night make sense. He thought about what Diaz had said. Tonight might get complicated before it gets simple. He almost said it out loud. The response that had formed itself in the back of his mind with the dry clarity of a man who had spent a significant portion of his adult life in situations that were either complicated or simple and knew which kind was actually more manageable. Tonight already is complicated, he thought. Simple was never an option. It was 4:17 in the morning. In 6 hours, the day shift would come in. In 6 hours, the building would change more people, more information moving between more desks, more opportunity for the wrong ears to hear the right conversations. Callahan and Diaz had a window, and windows at 4 in the morning had a way of closing very quickly once the sun came up. 2 rooms away, Aaron Callahan had spread everything he had across the table, 6 weeks of quiet investigation, physical copies of everything he'd been careful enough to keep outside the system, dispatch records he'd printed and stored at home rather than logging digitally. He was looking at it the way Madison had described, looking at her own research, seeing the pattern, the shape of it, the way everything pointed toward a center that had a name. Gerald Marsh. Division commander, 17 years on the force, 4 commendations, 2 previous internal affairs reviews that had come up clean. Callahan stared at the name and thought about what it meant to be the kind of person who built that record and did what Marsh had apparently done with the authority it earned him. Thought about it the way you think about something that genuinely disturbs you when you encounter it, not with satisfaction at being right, not with the cold competence of someone who has neutralized a target, but with the particular human difficulty of looking at betrayal clearly and understanding its full cost. 3 officers hurt, 1 almost killed tonight because she noticed, because she filed a report, because she did the exact thing she'd been trained to do by the institution that then sent her to an empty bridge at midnight. Callahan picked up his phone. He called the deputy superintendent directly, not through channels, not through any number that was logged in the department system, his personal number. A woman he had worked with for 11 years, whom he trusted not because the institution asked him to, but because he'd seen her tested and watched her choose right. She answered on the second ring. "Aaron," she said, "it's 4 in the morning. "I know," he said. "I need 30 minutes of your time right now. Not here. Not on a department line." A pause. The pause of someone who understood what those particular conditions meant when they were imposed by Aaron Callahan at 4 in the morning. "Tell me where," she said. Logan heard none of this. The shift in the building, but he felt the shift running the way you feel the weather, the particular quality of the air, the altered pace of footsteps in the hallway, the sense that something was moving toward the point where it would either break or resolve. He had felt it before. In Fallujah, in the hours before operations that had been planned in exactly this same compressed, urgency-driven way, when everyone who needed to be moving was moving, and the waiting was the most difficult discipline of all. He waited. And in the corridor outside Madison's temporary room, 2 officers stood with their backs to the door and their expressions arranged in the neutral professional blankness of people who have been given a specific instruction by a specific authority and intend to follow it precisely. They had been placed there by Diaz 20 minutes ago with the simple directive to admit no one whose name was not on a list of 3. Madison Hayes was still awake. She was tired in a way that went all the way down the exhaustion of blood loss and surgery and the sustained effort of functioning under threat, but she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept running the sequence. The call, the road, the bridge, the moment when everything that was supposed to be working stopped working all at once. She kept finding the same moment in the sequence, the one she'd skipped past at the time, because survival was more urgent than analysis. The radio, not bad signal, stopped like it'd been cut from outside the vehicle. Someone had known where she was going. Someone had known her route and her frequency and the timing of her shift. Someone with the kind of access that came from inside, from deep inside, from the place where systems were managed and records were kept. And a woman named Madison Hayes had filed a report 3 weeks ago to a man who had the authority to bury it. She thought about Logan. She thought about the way he'd said, "Stay awake," with the same steady persistence. Every time she'd felt herself beginning to slip. Not frantic, not desperate, just certain. The certainty of someone who had decided on an outcome and was executing toward it regardless of difficulty. She thought about the moment she'd reached for her weapon and pointed it at his chest, and the way he'd raised his hands all the way, palms out without flinching, without calculation, without the particular tightening of a person managing a situation. Just, I see you. I'm not a threat. We can start from there. She had been trained to categorize men like him before she knew anything about them. Vest, the patch, the road, the hour, every training module pointed the same direction. She had pointed her weapon in that direction, and he had raised his hands and said the thing that stopped her. I'm here because you're still alive. Not I didn't do this. Not I'm safe. Just the simple immediate fact of why he'd stopped, stripped of everything else, offered without defense, because defense would have taken time she didn't have. She realized, a person who had almost died because someone inside her own institution had wanted her gone. She was alive because someone outside every institution anyone had trusted had stopped anyway. That was a thought that would take a long time to finish having. Outside her door, one of the officers knocked twice, a prearranged signal. Then the door opened and Diaz came in with 2 cups of coffee and the look of someone who had just come from a conversation that had changed the weight of the night. Callahan's with the deputy superintendent, Diaz said, pulling a chair to the bedside. Madison looked at her. We're moving, Diaz said. Tonight, before the shift change. She handed Madison one of the coffee cups. I need to ask you about the soup. For a moment, just a flash of it, Madison Hayes almost laughed. She pressed her lips together. The pain from the movement reminded her not to, but the look in her eyes said what the laugh would have said. Behind the left cabinet door, she said, waterproof folder. Green. I'll send someone I trust within the hour, Diaz said. Send 2 people, Madison said, and make sure you're watching who notices you sending them. Diaz looked at her. Something in the detective's expression shifted the reassessment that people did when they discovered that someone they'd been protecting was simultaneously capable of protecting themselves. You're going to be a good cop when this is done, Diaz said. I already am a good cop, Madison said. Not arrogance, accuracy. The flat statement of someone who had done the math and didn't need it validated. Diaz said nothing for a moment. Then yeah, she said. You are. The night moved on its own momentum now. Documents were requested. Physical copies were secured. 2 people Diaz trusted drove to Madison's apartment building in an unmarked car and returned 40 minutes later with a waterproof green folder that contained 53 pages of research that a 27-year-old officer had compiled quietly, carefully over the course of months, without authority, without support, without anyone knowing she was doing it, except the man she'd reported to, who had then tried to make certain she couldn't finish. She had finished anyway. And Logan Whitmore sat in an interview room with an open door and listened to the building change around him, the specific sound of an institution beginning to reckon with something it would not be able to set aside, and he thought about the road, the lights, and the decision that had taken less than 5 seconds, but would take considerably longer to fully understand. He had stopped because stopping was what you did. He had stayed because staying was what you did after that. Everything else, the handcuffs, the room, the investigation unfolding in the rooms around him, was the accounting. Accountings had their own timetable, their own logic, their own particular way of arriving at truth when the right people did the right work at the right moment. He believed in that. He had seen it fail. He believed in it anyway. Dawn was still 2 hours away. The window was still open. And in the offices of the Cascade County Sheriff's Substation, Aaron Callahan was on the phone with the deputy superintendent, reading from 6 weeks of careful notes, making the case in the measured, evidence by evidence way that good investigators make cases when they know the outcome has to hold under scrutiny that will not be friendly. Madison Hayes, in her temporary room with her IV and her coffee and her fierce, exhausted eyes, was doing what Logan had told her to do in the rain. She was holding on to every detail, every single one. The green folder changed everything, not because its contents were a surprise. Callahan had already known the shape of what Madison was investigating. There is a difference between knowing the shape of something and holding the substance of it in your hands And when Callahan's trusted officer laid those 53 pages on the table at 5:47 in the morning, Deputy Superintendent, a woman named Patricia Voss, who had spent 26 years in Montana law enforcement and believed she had seen most of what this profession could produce, went very quiet in a way that meant she was recalibrating everything. How long? Voss said. She wasn't asking how long Madison had been researching. She was asking how long this had been happening inside her department without her knowing. 8 months minimum, Callahan said. Possibly longer. The 3 incidents we've documented are the ones that left trails. There may be others that didn't. Voss turned a page. Then another. She read without speaking, which was the kind of reading that meant she was absorbing rather than scanning, committing things to memory rather than simply registering them. Marsh, she said finally. Not a question. The report she filed went directly to him 3 weeks ago, Callahan said. 3 weeks later, she ends up at Miller Creek at midnight with no backup and a radio that stopped working. Voss set the folder down on the table. She looked at it for a moment with the expression of someone who is deciding how angry they're going to allow themselves to be, because the anger is useful but only in the right quantity, and too much of it right now will cost more than it produces. What do you need? She said. Full authority to move on Marsh before the shift change, Callahan said. System access suspended immediately. His personnel files unsealed. Warrants for his communications personal and department going back 12 months. It's a significant request. It's a significant situation. Voss looked at him. 26 years of her own experience running behind her eyes, sorting and categorizing, and arriving at the same destination it always arrived at when Aaron Callahan brought her something. He didn't bring things unless they were real. That wasn't a compliment, it was simply a documented pattern of behavior that had proven reliable enough to function as a working premise. You have 2 hours before shift change, she said. I know. If we move on Marsh and we're wrong, we're not wrong, Callahan said. The system access record alone is enough to open a formal investigation. The incident pattern corroborates. The timing of Madison Hayes' injury corroborates. Missing papers from her vehicle corroborate. He paused. We're not wrong. Voss picked up her phone. While Callahan began building the formal framework of what was about to happen to Gerald Marsh's career and freedom, Diaz was doing the other half of the work, the half that didn't get written into official records but was equally essential. She was making a list, not of evidence, of people. Specifically, people inside the substation who reported to Marsh, who had regular contact with Marsh, who had been present during the 22 minutes between the first cruiser arriving at Miller Creek and forensics securing the vehicle. She was cross-referencing that list against the dispatch logs for the night who had been on shift, who had access to which terminals, who had signed off on which communications. She was also thinking about Henderson and Vic, the 2 officers who'd been first on scene, both assigned to Marsh's division, both with system access that fell below the level required to modify dispatch records, but not below the level required to physically remove papers from a vehicle at a crime scene before forensics arrived. She pulled their personnel files. She read them with the particular attention of someone looking not for what was there, but for what was conspicuously absent: the gaps, the unexplained transfers, the performance reviews that were slightly too uniform, the internal affairs queries that had been opened and then quietly closed. Henderson had a query from 14 months ago, closed after 6 days. Reviewing officer Gerald Marsh. Diaz set the file down. She picked up her coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway. In the interview room, Logan had not slept. He had considered it, had spent a few minutes genuinely attempting the discipline of it, the way you attempted sleep in forward operating bases when sleep was available and your body needed it, even if your mind wasn't cooperating. But the building was too active and the situation was too unresolved, and some part of him that was wired specifically for unresolved situations kept him awake and attentive, processing the sounds and pauses and changed rhythms of the hallways outside his open door. 6:10 Diaz appeared. She didn't sit down this time. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and the look of someone who was about to deliver information and had already decided exactly how to deliver it. Voss has authorized the investigation, she said. Formal. Everything above board, everything documented, full chain of command established above Marsh's level. And Marsh, Logan said, doesn't know yet. She paused. Comes in at 7:30 for day shift. Callahan is going to meet him at the door. Logan thought about what that conversation would look like. The moment when a man who had 17 years building a record that insulated him from exactly this kind of accountability walked through a door and found it waiting on the other side. Anderson and Vic, he said. Diaz's expression shifted slightly. You read that fast. They were first on scene. They're on Marsh's division. The papers are gone. He looked at her. It wasn't complicated. We're pulling them in separately, she said, before shift change, before they have a chance to compare notes or make calls. We'll interview them with Voss present. She paused again. Logan. He waited. The charges against you are formally suspended pending investigation outcome, she said. Voss signed off on it 20 minutes ago. She looked at him steadily. You're not a suspect. You're a witness. Logan received this information without visible reaction. He nodded once, that was all. Your vest is in property, Diaz said. You can collect it at the desk. Not yet, Logan said. She raised an eyebrow. Not until this is done, he said. If I walk out of this building right now, I'm not here. When it matters. He looked at her, like to stay. Diaz studied him for a long moment. The calculation behind her eyes was not unkind, it was just thorough. The way a good detective's calculations always were. Then, I'll get you a better chair, she said. She left. Logan stayed. The next hour moved in increments. Diaz interviewed Henderson at 6:20, alone in a room with a running recorder and the green folder visible on the table between them. She didn't lead with accusations. She started with the scene, walked him through the timeline of arrival, the first minutes, the positioning of the vehicle, what he'd observed. Henderson was composed. Professionally composed in the way that people are when they've prepared for a conversation without knowing exactly which form it would take. Then Diaz said, walk me through the vehicle inspection, specifically what you observed in the driver's side door panel. Henderson's composure didn't break, but it shifted a fractional change in the quality of his stillness. The difference between a man who is genuinely thinking and a man who is deciding. Standard contents, he said. Registration, insurance. Nothing notable. Diaz opened the green folder. She turned it around and pushed it across the table without a word. Henson looked at it. His eyes tracked down the page, the correlation tables, the incident dates, the dispatch log cross-references. Face stayed neutral, but his hands, which had been relaxed on the table, moved to his lap. That's from Officer Hayes' personal research files, Diaz said. Files she compiled over several months and stored at her apartment. We retrieved them this morning. She paused. The copies she kept in her vehicle, the ones in the driver's side door panel, aren't in the forensics inventory. She kept looking at him. You were first on scene. You inspected the vehicle. Anderson said, I want a union rep, which was not the same as saying he hadn't done it. Both of them understood that. Diaz closed the folder. Her view suspended pending union representation. She said to the recorder. She stopped the recording, looked at Henderson, and said the thing that wasn't on the record. What Marsh told you this was about and what this is actually about are two different things, officer. You have a window right now that will close. I'd think carefully about how you want to be positioned when it does. She left him there with that and went to find Callahan. Callahan was in Voss's temporary office with two other detectives from a neighboring county who had been called in to ensure the independence of the process, a detail Voss had insisted on, because the moment Marsh's name became official, internal management of the investigation created vulnerabilities that none of them could afford. Callahan was laying out the warrant application with the methodical precision of someone who had done this enough times to understand that the quality of the paperwork was the difference between a case that held and one that didn't, regardless of how clear the facts were. Phone buzzed. He looked at it. Diaz Henderson lawyered up. Vic is next. Proceed. He put the phone down and kept writing. 7:12, Gerald Marsh pulled into the parking structure of the Cascade County Sheriff's substation in his personal vehicle, a dark blue pickup truck he kept spotlessly maintained, and sat for a moment before getting out. This was something he did every morning, a habit he developed early in his career. A few minutes of quiet before the day started, a small ritual of composure. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, with gray coming in at his temples, and the kind of face that projected dependability. The kind of face that people trusted because it showed them what it wanted them to see with such consistency that the showing became invisible. He did not know what was waiting for him on the other side of the door, or he thought he didn't. Something the specific animal instinct of a man who has spent 17 years managing situations that required him to maintain awareness of threats to his position made him sit in that truck for slightly longer than usual, made him look at the building entrance with an attention that was different in quality from his normal attention. Then he got out and walked toward the door. Callahan was there, not in the lobby, not waiting, in a way that announced itself, just standing to the left of the entrance with his jacket on and his badge visible in an expression that was entirely neutral, entirely professional, and therefore to a man like Marsh, who was skilled at reading the temperature of rooms and faces, immediately identifiable as the expression of something serious. "Commander Marsh," Callahan said, "I need you to come with me." Marsh looked at him. 1 second. 2. The processing was invisible, but Logan, watching from 50 feet away through a window, would have recognized it, the rapid assessment of a man cataloging what he knew, what he didn't know, and what the gap between them was likely to cost. "What's this about, Aaron?" The tone was measured. The use of the first name was deliberate, an attempt to establish the informal register, the colleague dynamic, the long shared history register that implied this was probably a routine conversation. "We can discuss that in a moment," Callahan said. "This way, please." The please was the tell. Callahan never said please in a professional context unless he was required to by procedure, and Marsh was senior enough to know that. The please meant this was already above Marsh's ability to redirect through casual authority. Marsh walked. He was good. Logan had expected a man who had coordinated something like what this investigation was revealing would be good at the surface performance, and Marsh was better than good. Walked with Callahan, without hurrying, without any visible agitation, through the building to the conference room, where Voss was waiting along with the 2 external detectives and a department attorney. He sat down in the chair indicated and set his hands on the table and said, "Tell me what this is." Voss said, "This is a formal notification that you are the subject of an internal affairs investigation, Commander. Your system access has been suspended as of 600 hours this morning. Communication Records Department and personnel are subject to warrant, which has been issued by Judge Carver at 6:45. She paused. "You are entitled to representation. I strongly advise you to call counsel immediately." Marsh looked at Voss. He looked at Callahan, then at the 2 external detectives, and then, and this was the thing, Logan had not predicted and could not have predicted from 50 feet away watching through glass, and which Callahan would replay in his memory for a long time. Afterward, Marsh smiled. It was not the smile of a man caught. It was not the smile of fear dressed as bravado. It was something more specific and more chilling. The smile of a man who has just understood that a situation he thought was contained has moved past the point where containment was possible, who had apparently prepared for exactly this eventuality. "Like to make a call," Marsh said. "Of course," Voss said. "Not to an attorney," Marsh said. "Not yet." He looked at her. "Like to call the FBI." The room went still. Callahan's expression didn't change, but something happened behind it. A rapid, silent recalibration, the mental equivalent of a man who has been solving a puzzle and suddenly realized the puzzle was larger than the frame he'd been working in. "Why the FBI, Commander?" Voss said. Her voice was precisely as steady as it had been 30 seconds ago, which was itself a significant achievement. "Because what you're investigating isn't a local corruption case," Marsh said. "It's been federal for about 4 months." He looked at Callahan now, directly, with the steadiness of someone who has been holding information in reserve and is making the deliberate choice to release it. "I've been working with an FBI task force on interstate evidence falsification and dispatch manipulation that goes beyond this county. Beyond this state." He paused. "I'm not the person you're looking for. I'm the person who's been looking for the same people you're looking for. From the inside." The silence in that room was the specific silence of a moment that reorganizes everything. Callahan sat very still. He was thinking Logan, watching from outside, could see the quality of his stillness and recognize it as the stillness of a man in rapid, intensive thought rather than shock, because shock would have shown differently. Callahan was not shocked. He was recalculating. If that's true, Voss said carefully, then you understand why we had no way of knowing it. Entirely, Marsh said without defensiveness. That was the point. Cover that can be seen through is not a cover. He looked at his hands on the table. The 3 officers who were injured, that wasn't me. That was the network I've been building the case against. Specifically, 2 individuals with dispatch access who have been operating under protection from a source outside this department. He met Voss's eyes. The call that sent Madison Hayes to that bridge tonight came from one of those individuals. Her preliminary report to me was the trigger, not because I used it against her, because someone in the network had access to my office communications and saw it before I could act on it. Callahan said, "Who?" Marsh said, "Make the call first. The FBI agent in charge is Special Agent Dana Okafor. She'll confirm everything I've just told you in under 5 minutes." Callahan looked at Voss. Voss looked at the department attorney. The attorney gave a small, careful nod, the nod of someone saying this has to be verified, but it has to be verified now, not in 6 hours. Voss picked up her phone. Logan was not in that room. He was watching through the window when Callahan stepped out into the hallway 2 minutes later alone and stood with his hand on the door frame and his head slightly down. The posture of a man reorienting, reassessing. Not defeated something more complicated than that. The look of someone who has just discovered that the map they've been using is accurate, but the territory is larger than the map showed. Logan got up and walked toward him. Callahan heard his footsteps and looked up. For a moment, the 2 men just looked at each other, the detective and the biker, the 20-year investigator and the Marine, who had stopped when everyone else kept driving. "It's not him," Logan said, not a question. He'd read it in Callahan's posture before Callahan said a word. "It's not him," Callahan confirmed. "Or it's not only him and not in the way we thought." "Who else?" Callahan told him. Briefly, precisely the FBI angle, Marsh's claimed undercover role, the suggestion of a network with reach beyond this county. Logan listened without interrupting, the way he listened to everything with his full attention and without the need to respond to every piece as it arrived. "You believe him?" Logan said when Callahan finished. "Voss is calling the FBI contact now," Callahan said. "We'll know in minutes." "That's not what I asked," Logan said. Callahan looked at him. A pause. "I don't know," he said honestly. "The story is either true or it's the best constructed defensive narrative I've encountered in 20 years. I can't tell which yet." "What's your instinct?" Logan said. Callahan was quiet for 3 seconds. "That it's true," he said. "And that's what bothers me. Because if Marsh has been working this from the inside for 4 months and someone in the network had access to his office communications," he stopped. "And someone inside the FBI pipeline is also compromised," Logan finished. Callahan's jaw tightened. "Or someone with access to a communication channel that Marsh was using," Logan said, "which might not be FBI at all, which might be internal to this department." He looked at Callahan. "Who knew Marsh was cooperating, even informally?" "That's what I need to find out," Callahan said, "and I need to do it before anyone in this building who shouldn't know about this conversation has a chance to know about it." Phone rang. He looked at it. "Voss." He answered immediately. "She confirmed," Voss said from inside the conference room. Her voice was steady and careful. "Special Agent Okafor confirmed that Marsh has been cooperating with a federal task force since February. The operation is active." A pause. "Aaron. The task force has been investigating dispatch manipulation across 3 states. The network is larger than we understood. Does Okafor know about Madison Hayes?" Callahan said. "She does now," Voss said. "She's asking for an emergency meeting. She says there's information the task force has that directly affects the safety of Officer Hayes." Another pause, shorter, harder. "She says the person who ordered the attack on Hayes is not in this county." Callahan looked at Logan. Logan looked back at him. "I'll be there in 2 minutes," Callahan said, and hung up. Turned to Logan. "This has just become a federal situation," he said. "I know. Which means my authority to manage what happens next is going to become limited," Logan said. "Yes. Madison is going to need to be briefed," Callahan said, "before the FBI walks in, before the situation changes in a way she hasn't been prepared for." He looked at Logan with the directness of someone who had arrived at a decision they didn't entirely expect to arrive at. "She trusts you, more than she trusts most of us right now, for obvious and understandable reasons." He paused. "Would you be willing to be the one to tell her?" Logan thought about Madison Hayes in that hospital bed with her sharp eyes and her coffee and her 53 pages of careful research. Thought about what it would mean to be the one who walked into that room with news that reorganized everything she'd been told in the last few hours. Yes, he said. He walked to her room. The two officers at the door looked at him, then at something on one of their phones, a message, a clearance, Diaz's authorization. They moved aside. Logan opened the door. Madison was awake. Of course she was awake. She looked at him when he came in with the specific alertness of a person who had been waiting for someone to bring them something real and who had been frustrated by the absence of it. What happened, she said, immediately. Something happened. Tell me. Logan pulled the chair close and sat down. He looked at her directly. Marsh is not who we thought he was, he said. Or he is, and he isn't. He's been cooperating with the FBI on a case that's larger than what you found. What you found, your research, the dispatch irregularities, you were right. You were completely right. But the network runs bigger and deeper than this county. Madison was still, very still. The attack on me, she said. Marsh didn't order it. Apparently not, Logan said. He says the preliminary report you filed to him was intercepted, that someone in the network had access to his office communications. They knew you were looking before he could respond to what you'd found. Madison closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds, then opened them. So my report, she said quietly. Filing that report didn't make me safer. It made me a target faster. You were going to be a target regardless, Logan said. What you'd found was enough. The report just accelerated the timeline. That's not actually comforting, she said. No, he agreed. Isn't. Who ordered it, she said. Who sent that call? That's what the FBI is trying to establish, Logan said. Apparently, the reach of this is across 3 states. Dispatch manipulation, evidence falsification. The attack on you is part of a much larger operation than anyone in this building understood. Madison looked at the ceiling. She breathed, in, out, carefully, the way she'd been breathing since she woke up, the discipline of someone managing pain and channeling whatever energy remained into thinking clearly. 3 states, she said. Yes. And I accidentally pulled the thread, she said. You pulled the right thread, Logan said, at the right time. The fact that it's bigger than you knew doesn't change what you did. You did it right. She looked at him. Something moved through her expression, not gratitude, not quite. Something more complicated. The look of a person re-examining a sequence of and finding that they were part of something they hadn't understood the size of when they were inside it. The FBI is going to come in here, she said. Yes, they're going to take over. Almost certainly. Everything I found, everything in that folder, becomes federal evidence, Logan said, which means it's protected, which means what you did all those months of quiet work that matters. It's part of a federal record now. She was quiet for a moment. Then what about Henderson and Vic? Diaz has them, Logan said, separately. Henderson lawyered up. They'll cooperate or they won't. Either way, the timeline of the evidence removal from your vehicle is documented. Madison nodded, processing, moving through it with the systematic quality that Logan recognized from the bridge, the refusal to be overwhelmed by information, the discipline of taking it in pieces and placing each piece in relation to the ones already processed. You, she said. I'm a witness, he said. The charges are suspended. That's not enough, she said immediately. Suspended isn't clear. Suspended means someone can revisit it. Madison. No, she said, with the quiet firmness of someone who has decided on a position and is not moving. What you did that night, you stopped when no one else did. You kept me alive. You gave Callahan information that changed the shape of this investigation. You're still sitting in a room in a police station with suspended charges over your head. She looked at him. That's not right, and I'm not going to accept it as a temporary outcome. It's not your decision, he said. I'm the witness whose testimony is the foundation of your clearance, she said, which makes it partially my decision. She held his gaze. I'm going to make sure it's complete, not suspended. Complete. Logan looked at her for a moment. You know, he said, for someone who pointed a weapon at my chest approximately 8 hours ago, you're very committed to my legal status. I was doing my job 8 hours ago, she said. I'm doing my job now. A pause. The job includes being honest about what happened and who was responsible for what. She looked at her hands. You didn't choose to be on that road tonight. You made a choice when you got there. There's a difference. There is, he agreed. Outside the door, footsteps more than one pair, moving with purpose. The FBI's arrival, Callahan leading them through the building. The shift of weight in the investigation from local to federal, the handoff of authority that would restructure everything that came next. Logan looked toward the door, then back at Madison. "They're here," he said. "I know." She straightened the bed, a small movement, a deliberate gathering of herself. "Logan." "Yeah, when this is done," she stopped. Started again with the careful precision she'd used for everything that mattered. Been a cop for 2 years. In 2 years, been told to trust the institution, trust the process, trust the structure. Those things are mostly true, mostly worth trusting. She looked at him. "But tonight I learned something that I'm going to need a while to finish understanding. That sometimes the person you're supposed to distrust is the one who actually shows up." Logan said nothing. There was nothing required. "I'm not going to forget that," she said. "I know," he said. The door opened. Special Agent Dana Okafor came in first, a woman in her 40s who moved with the specific authority of someone who had been in federal law enforcement long enough to stop performing confidence and simply have it. She looked at Logan, then at Madison, with the kind of rapid, comprehensive assessment that took in everything relevant and sorted it fast. "Officer Hayes," she said, "I need about an hour of your time, and I need to apologize in advance because some of what I'm going to tell you is going to make the last 8 hours feel like a prologue." Madison looked at Logan. Logan stood up. He gave Madison a brief nod, the nod of someone acknowledging a handoff, recognizing that this next part belonged to other people, and that his role in it was to step back and let it proceed. He moved to the door. "Logan," Madison said. He stopped. "Don't go far," she said. He looked at her, Okafor. The two agents behind her. Callahan in the doorway with his notebook and his 20 years of trained eyes and his 3 words written at the bottom of a page at midnight. "I'll be right outside," Logan said. He stepped into the hallway. The door closed behind him. He stood there for a moment in the corridor with the sounds of the building changing around him, the shift between the quiet of the investigation's early hours and the busier momentum of the federal involvement. And he thought about something Reese had said to him once, years ago, after an operation that had gone sideways and then been salvaged by a series of decisions that nobody had planned for. "The only reason anything got saved tonight," Reese had said, "is that somebody stopped when stopping was hard. The rest of it, the analysis, the backup, the whole structure, none of it means anything if the first person doesn't stop." Logan hadn't thought about that in a long time. He was thinking about it now. Down the hall, through a closed conference room door, Gerald Marsh was on the phone with the FBI task force coordinator, beginning the process of explaining everything he knew to people who now had to rapidly recalibrate their operation, in light of the fact that their cover had been blown sideways by an attack on a young officer that was supposed to remain invisible, and had instead become, by the action of a man who stopped his motorcycle at midnight, the most visible thing in the state. In a temporary hospital room, Madison Hayes was listening to Dana Okafor begin to lay out the shape of something that was much larger than a Montana highway and a wrecked police SUV, something that had tentacles across 3 states, something that had been operating for longer than anyone in this building had understood, something that would take months to fully dismantle. But it was beginning to be dismantled because of 53 pages in a waterproof folder behind some soup. Because of a woman who noticed things other people didn't want to see. Because of a man who stopped when stopping was the most complicated possible choice. Those 3 things, combined on a specific night on a specific road in rural Montana, had opened a door that no one with an interest in keeping it closed had expected to open. The door was open, and outside in the hallway, with his back against the wall and his arms crossed, and the morning light coming through a window at the end of the corridor, Logan Whitmore was doing what he'd always been best at doing in the aftermath of something that had required everything. He was standing watch. The hour Dana Okafor had asked for turned into 3. Logan knew this, not because anyone told him, but because he watched the light at the end of the corridor change the pale early morning quality of it, giving way to the harder, more certain light of mid-morning, and because the door to Madison's room stayed closed for that entire span. And because the quality of the silence behind it was the silence of people working rather than waiting. He didn't leave. He'd said he'd be right outside, And so he was right outside, and that was that. Reese arrived at 8:40. Logan heard him, before he saw him, heard the particular rhythm of Reese Calloway's boots on a hard floor. It was a sound Logan had filed away in the part of his memory that stored useful auditory information the way other people stored phone numbers. Reese was 6'2", built like someone had assembled him for a specific purpose, and hadn't wasted material on anything decorative, with a gray-streaked beard and eyes that had the permanent quality of watchfulness that came from too many years in too many places where not watching had consequences. He came down the corridor and stopped beside Logan and looked at the closed door, and then at Logan. "You look terrible," Reese said. "I've been awake since yesterday," Logan said. "You look worse than that, thanks." Reese stood beside him and looked at the door for a moment. He'd been briefed. Logan had called him again at 6, with a fuller picture than the first call had provided. Reese had listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Logan had always appreciated about him, the ability to receive information completely before responding to it. "The eye's been in there 3 hours," Reese said. "Yes. Marsh is cooperating, apparently. The network is bigger than anyone understood." Yes, Reese absorbed this. "How is she?" Logan thought about how to answer that accurately. "Sharp," he said finally. "Sharper than she should be, given everything. She's running on about 4 hours of post-surgery rest, and she's processing federal-level information and asking the right questions." He paused. "She's going to be fine." "I wasn't asking about the officer," Reese said. Logan looked at him. Reese looked back with the patience of a man who had known Logan for 11 years and understood the specific ways that Logan avoided being asked about himself. "Fine," Logan said. "You stopped on a dark road at midnight for a woman who pointed a gun at you, and then you spent the rest of the night in an interrogation room while a federal corruption case reorganized itself around you," Reese said. "And now you're standing in a hallway outside her door because you told her you'd be right outside." "Yes," Logan said. "That's not fine," Reese said. "That's something, but it's not fine." "Reese, I'm not criticizing it," Reese said. "I'm naming it. There's a difference." He looked at the door again. "The guys are outside. 3 of them. I told them to stay in the lot." Logan processed this. "Why are 3 of them here?" "Because one of ours stopped on a road and kept a cop alive and then sat in a room all night. And I wasn't going to let that go unacknowledged," Reese said with the flat simplicity of a man stating something he considered obvious. "Because the situation you described involves a network that has already demonstrated it's willing to go after people who get close to what it's doing. That woman in that room got very close to what it's doing." He paused. "Nobody asked me, I'm just here." Logan looked at him for a moment. "You know the optics of 3 Hells Angels in a police substations are exactly what they are," Reese said. "Men with military service and emergency training who are here because one of their own did the right thing, and they wanted to be present for what comes next." He met Logan's eyes. "Let them challenge the optics. I've been challenging them for 20 years. Logan said nothing for a moment. "Then thank you." "Don't thank me," Reese said. "Buy me coffee when this is done. There's a diner 2 miles from here, and I've been awake since your phone call, and I want eggs." Despite everything, despite the hours and the exhaustion and the weight of what was still unresolved, something in Logan's chest moved. Not quite a laugh, close enough. The door opened. Okafor came out first, followed by the 2 agents who'd been with her. She saw Logan and stopped. She looked at him with the same comprehensive assessment she'd used in the hospital room, quick, complete, arriving at something. "You're Whitmore," she said. "Yes. I've been briefed on what you did at the scene," she said, "and on the information you provided to Detective Callahan." She paused. "I want you to understand that Officer Hayes' survival and the preservation of her research represent a significant development in a federal investigation that has been running for 8 months. Actions last night directly contributed to both." She said it with the directness of someone who considers accuracy a form of respect. "That's on the record." "I appreciate that," Logan said. Okafor looked at Reese, at the patch on his vest, at the expression on his face, which was the expression of a man who was waiting to see if he'd be treated like a problem. "Are you with him?" she said. "I'm his chapter president," Reese said. "Reese Calloway, former military, Fallujah, combat medic." Okafor looked at him for a moment with the calculating attention of someone filing a piece of information in the right location. Then she looked back at Logan. "We're going to need formal statements from you, detailed, recorded." That'll be today. She paused. And I need you to understand that as of this moment, what happened at Miller Creek Bridge is part of a federal investigation, which means certain aspects of it are going to require your discretion. Understood, Logan said. Good, she moved to go, then stopped. She's asking for you, she said. Hayes. She was fairly insistent about it, which seems to be a pattern with her. Logan went in. The neon sign outside had. Madison looked like she'd been through another round of something, the specific look of a person who has just had the size of their situation significantly expanded and is in the process of adjusting their interior architecture to accommodate it. She was upright. Her eyes were clear. And when Logan came in, she looked at him with an expression that contained, underneath its exhaustion, something that almost relief. How much did she tell you? Logan said, pulling the chair close. Enough, Madison said. 3 states, 8 months. 17 individuals currently under investigation, of which 4 are law enforcement personnel with active credentials. She stopped, breathed. One of the 4 is the person who modified the dispatch call that sent me to Miller Creek. Who? Logan said, a dispatch supervisor named Roy Cather. Works a different county. Covers rural routes on the night shift. He's been modifying emergency calls, creating fabricated emergencies, redirecting backup, sometimes cutting vehicle communications remotely. She paused. He's done it 11 times in 8 months. I was number 11. The others? Some of them were just sent to wrong locations, delayed, confused, nothing serious. 3 of us were targeted specifically. Women on isolated routes who had either stumbled onto the operation or whose research made us inconvenient. She looked at her hands. One of the other 2 is still on medical leave. Her name is Officer Brianna Torres. She's been told she was in an accident. Madison looked up. She wasn't in an accident. Logan was quiet for a moment. Okafor is moving on Cather today, Madison said. As soon as the warrant clears, which Okafor says is approximately. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 40 minutes from now. A pause. She wanted me to know before it happened. She said I'd earned the right to know the sequence. You had, Logan said. Cather is the operational link, Madison continued, thinking through it as she spoke, the way she'd been thinking through everything aloud, precisely placing each piece. He's not the top. There's a financial structure above him. The network is apparently connected to a broader organized crime operation that's been using law enforcement route manipulation to manage drug corridor protection. She paused. My research was never about drugs. I was looking at dispatch irregularities. But the dispatch irregularities existed because someone needed specific roads clear at specific times, and female officers on rural routes were being redirected or removed because they were thorough, Logan said. She looked at him. You were thorough, he said. You noticed things. You documented them. That's what made you a problem for them. Madison absorbed this. The particular difficulty of understanding that the quality that had put her in danger was the same quality that had broken the case open was visible in her expression, not self-pity, nothing like that, just the genuine human complexity of holding 2 contradictory truths simultaneously. Cather knew who filed the report, she said. Not just that a report existed, he knew it was me specifically, and he knew before Marsh did, which means the communication breach wasn't Marsh's phone. It was something else. She met Logan's eyes. Okafor thinks there's a second internal contact, someone lower level, someone with access to incoming report logs. They're still working that, so it's not fully contained yet, Logan said. No, Madison said. It won't be fully contained until all 17 individuals are in custody, which Okafor estimates is. She stopped. She didn't give me a timeline. She said it was active and progressing. Federal language for soon, Logan said. That's what I assumed. She looked at the door. What's happening out there? In the building? Callahan and Diaz are coordinating with Okafor's team, Logan said. Henderson and Vic are still being held separately. Marsh is somewhere giving a very long statement. He paused. Reese is in the hallway. Madison blinked. Your chapter president? He came when he heard what happened, Logan said simply. That's what he does. She looked at the door as though she could see through it. Her expression was complex, the face of a person dismantling a pre-assembled assumption and finding the reality more nuanced than the assembly had allowed for. Brought 3 others. Logan said, they're in the parking lot. Why? Madison said. Logan thought about how Reese had answered that same question 40 minutes ago. He repeated it as accurately as he could, because one of ours did the right thing, and they wanted to be present for what comes next. Madison was quiet for a long moment. That's a code, she said finally. Yes, it's a different code than I was taught to expect from men with that patch. Most codes look different from the inside than from the outside, Logan said. Stein had. She looked at him with the careful attention of someone learning something they should probably have been taught differently before now. Then, Okafor wants me transferred to a more secure location today. Not this hospital, not this county. There are people in this network who don't know the extent of what's been compromised yet, and until Cather and the others are in custody, my location is a vulnerability. That's smart, Logan said. I know it's smart, she said. She stopped. Something crossed her face that was the first genuinely unguarded thing he'd seen from her since the bridge. Not fear. Something quieter than fear. The specific difficulty of a person who has been strong and precise and controlled through something terrible and is now being asked to move to the next phase before the weight of the previous one has fully landed. Like it to be done, she said. I'd like it to just be done. Will be, he said. You can't promise that. No, he agreed. But I've been in enough situations that felt like they would never end to know that they do. He looked at her steadily. All of them end. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded, one small, firm movement that meant she'd accepted the information and was filing it where it belonged. I want to talk to Torres, she said, Brianna Torres, the other officer. When this is far enough along that it's safe, I want to talk to her. Why? Logan said. Because she's been told she was in an accident for 8 months, Madison said. She deserves to know the truth about what happened to her. She deserves to hear it from someone who went through the same thing. She paused. Not from an FBI agent with a case file. From someone who understands what it feels like. Logan looked at her for a moment. You just came out of surgery 12 hours ago, he said. I know when I came out of surgery, she said, with the precise flatness that he'd come to recognize as her version of affectionate impatience. I'm noting it for the record, he said. Your record or mine? Both, he said. She almost smiled. It was the same fractional almost smile from the bridge brief reel belonging entirely to her. Logan noticed it the same way he'd noticed it the first time, with the part of him that filed important things away without making a production of it. The door opened again. Callahan this time with Diaz behind him. Both of them moved with the specific energy of people who have been running hard and are momentarily stopping to recalibrate before running again. The warrant cleared, Callahan said. He was looking at Logan and Madison, together with the expression of a man who is past the point where anything surprises him. Okafor's team is moving on Cather now. Madison straightened. How long until confirmation, she said. Okafor estimated 40 minutes for the physical arrest. Processing after that. Callahan looked at her. You should know Cather's department has been notified that he's under federal investigation, which means in about 30 minutes, every person in that network who has contact with anyone in his department is going to know the operation is compromised. That accelerates everything, Madison said. Yes, Callahan said. Okafor knows that. She's prepared for it. She says the acceleration was inevitable once Hayes survived. He paused, and in the pause was the unspoken acknowledgement of what that meant, that the plan had been for Madison not to survive, and that the survival of the plan's target had introduced a cascade of consequences that the network was now scrambling to manage and couldn't. The scramble is actually useful, Callahan continued. Panicked people make decisions they wouldn't make if they were calm. Panicked decisions leave traces. Who are they going to panic toward? Logan said. Callahan looked at him. That's the question, he said. Okafor thinks there's a communication protocol, a way for network members to signal each other when the operation is compromised. That protocol activates in the next hour. Her team will be watching it. If it doesn't, Diaz said, then either they're disciplined enough not to activate it, which tells us something, Callahan said, or the network is more fragmented than we currently understand, which tells us something else. Either way, you learn something, Logan said. That's the idea, Callahan said. He looked between Logan and Madison. How are you both doing? The question was asked with the direct personal sincerity of a man who had been working alongside the edges of human crisis for 20 years and had never lost the instinct to check. Logan appreciated it. Madison, he could see, appreciated it differently, with the slight surprise of someone who hadn't expected it from that direction. Been better, Madison said. I've been worse. This is somewhere in the middle, Logan? Callahan said. I need that flannel shirt back at some point, Logan said. Callahan looked at him for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed a short, genuine sound that broke the surface tension of the morning. Diaz made a sound that was adjacent to it. Even Madison, despite the pain that cost her, did the thing with the corner of her mouth. I'll put in a property request, Callahan said. Then his phone went. He looked at it, and the brief human moment closed like a window. Okafor, he said, and answered it and stepped out of the room. Diaz looked at Logan. There's someone here for you, she said. Parking lot. Your chapter president. I know, Logan said. He's been there 3 hours, Diaz said. He hasn't come in. Just, she paused, searching for the right word. Present. That's Reese, Logan said. Diaz looked at him with the expression of someone revising something, not dramatically, not with any announcement of the revision, just quietly updating an existing file with new information that required a different folder. Your charges are formally cleared, she said. Not suspended. Cleared. Voss signed it 20 minutes ago. She looked at Madison. Per your request. Madison nodded once. She looked at Logan. Logan looked at her. There it is, she said. There it is, he agreed. Now you can leave, she said, if you want to. Do you want me to, he said. She looked at him for a moment, the honest, direct look of a person deciding whether to be on it about something that made them slightly uncomfortable. No, she said, but that shouldn't be the deciding factor. It's one factor, Logan said, not the only one. He looked at Diaz. How long until Cather is in custody? Okafor's timeline. 37 minutes now, Diaz said, checking her phone. Give or take. Then I'll stay until Cather is in custody, Logan said. Madison looked at her hands on the blanket, then back up. Thank you, she said quietly. You don't have to thank me, he said. I know I don't have to, she said. That's not why I'm doing it. Down the hall, Callahan was still on the phone with Okafor. Expression on his face, visible through the conference room window, was the expression of a man receiving information that was landing somewhere between relief and something more complicated. Logan watched him from his chair. Diaz had stepped out, back to the coordination effort that was running through the substation like current through a wire, everything connected, everything moving, the massive slow machinery of federal law enforcement grinding into its decisive stage. Tell me something, Madison said. Logan looked at her. When you were in the Marines, she said, after a situation ended, after the thing you'd been through was resolved, or as resolved as it was going to get, what did you do with it? Where did you put it? The question was more personal than anything she'd asked him, and she asked it with the careful precision of someone who has a reason for asking and wants an accurate answer rather than a comfortable one. Logan thought about it genuinely. Different things at different times, he said. Early on, I tried to put it away. Lock the door, move on, function. He looked at the wall. Doesn't work. Or it works for a while and then it doesn't, which is worse than if it hadn't worked at all. What works, she said. Letting it be what it was, he said. Not making it smaller than it was to make it easier to carry. Not making it larger than it was to justify how it felt. He looked at her. Just letting it be the actual size of the actual thing. She was quiet for a moment. That sounds simple. It's not, he said. It's the opposite of simple. Simple is filing it somewhere and calling it handled. How long does it take, she said, to let it be the actual size? Depends on the size, he said. She looked at the ceiling. This is a large size. Yes, he agreed, it is. Okay, she said. Not defeat acceptance. The particular acceptance of someone who has asked a real question and received a real answer and is now integrating it. Okay. Callahan appeared in the doorway. His phone was in his hand and his expression had crossed from complicated to clear, the expression of resolution of a thing that had been in motion arriving at its destination. Cather is in custody, he said. The room absorbed this for a moment. Madison closed her eyes. 3 seconds. 4. She breathed in and breathed out, and when she opened her eyes again, they were wet at the edges, not crying, not quite. Just the involuntary physical response of a body that has been holding tension for a very long time and has just been told it can release some of it. She didn't apologize for it. Logan noticed that she didn't apologize for it and thought that was exactly right. Good, she said. Her voice was steady. What about the second internal contact? The one with access to incoming report logs. Okafor's team identified them in Cather's communications, Callahan said. Records clerk named Phil Doran. He's being picked up now. Who else? Logan said. 3 more across 2 counties, Callahan said. All connected through the financial structure above Cather. Okafor says by end of day today, the operational layer of the network will be in custody. He paused. The structure above that the organized crime connection is a longer timeline. But the law enforcement component, the part that's been manipulating dispatch and targeting officers, he looked at Madison. That ends today. Madison nodded. There's something else, Callahan said. Tone shifted not to something heavier exactly, but to something that required more care. He came fully into the room and stood with his notebook in his hand. Okafor asked me to let you know, both of you, that the federal investigation team is preparing a report on the events of last night. The full sequence. Miller Creek Bridge, the arrest of Logan, the information chain that led to the identification of Cather. He looked at Logan. Your name is in that report as a material witness who provided information critical to the progression of the investigation. He paused. Okafor's words were, and I'm quoting directly, that the case moved 12 hours faster because of what you did at that bridge. Logan said nothing. That's going to be public record, Callahan said. When this is done and the case is closed, that report becomes part of the public record. Your name, your actions, your role in this. He looked at Logan steadily. I thought you should know that. Logan looked at the floor for a moment, then at Callahan. I didn't stop at that bridge so my name would be in a federal report, he said. I know that, Callahan said. That's part of why it's there. The afternoon built on the morning's momentum. Formal statements were taken Logan's first, with Okafor present and a federal recorder running, then Madison's, which took longer because the depth of her research required thorough documentation. Reese was brought in from the parking lot at Logan's request and introduced to Callahan and Diaz with the particular careful courtesy of men meeting across a line that has been present so long it feels like geography. Reese handled it the way he handled everything, directly, without performance, with the steady composure of a man who has nothing to prove to anyone and knows it. The 3 chapter members who'd been in the parking lot were eventually invited inside for coffee. This was Diaz's doing a small, deliberate gesture that Logan noticed and said nothing about. They sat in the break room with 2 of Callahan's junior detectives, and the conversation that started awkwardly became, by the second cup, the conversation of men who had more in common than the patches, and the badges suggested, because service leaves marks that recognize themselves in other marked people. Henderson, by 11 in the morning, had stopped waiting for his union rep and had begun talking. Information he provided about the evidence removal from Madison's vehicle confirmed what the investigation had already established, and added detail he hadn't known the full scope of what Marsh was doing or why, and told only that certain materials needed to be secured before forensics arrived, had been paid through an indirect route that Okafor's financial team was already tracing. He was frightened, which was appropriate. He was also, Logan thought, watching through glass as Diaz and an Okafor agent conducted the recorded interview, genuinely unaware of what the papers he'd removed actually documented. He'd been used as a logistical piece by people who understood the full picture and had shared only what he needed to execute a single task. Vic, separately, confirmed the same story with the same frightened specificity. Neither of them had known about Madison's preliminary report. Neither of them had known about Cather or the network or the 3 officers. They'd known only what Marsh, who was not, it turned out, the architect of what they'd been used for, but rather its investigative opponent, trying to dismantle from the inside what they'd been helping without knowing it had not been in a position to tell them, because telling them would have required exposing himself. The geometry of it was intricate and genuinely unpleasant. Marsh tried to warn her, Diaz said to Logan, in the corridor outside the interview rooms, mid-afternoon, after she filed the report before the attack. He tried to send a warning through a channel he thought was secure. Logan looked at her. The channel wasn't secure, Diaz said. Cather had access to it. He intercepted the warning before it reached Hayes, which is why she never got it. She paused. If she'd gotten that warning, she wouldn't have gone to Miller Creek. The case wouldn't have broken open, Logan said. No, Diaz said, it wouldn't have. She said it with the specific tone, someone who has spent the last 80 of situations in which terrible things turn out to be the mechanism of important outcomes, who hasn't arrived at any comfortable resolution. I don't know what to do with that, she said. You don't have to do anything with it right now, Logan said. Right now it's just true. Diaz looked at him. You're very good at that, she said. What? At letting things be what they are without immediately deciding what they mean. Logan thought about what he'd told Madison an hour ago, about letting things be the actual size of the actual thing. I had a long time to learn it, he said. I wasn't always good at it. Were you worse at it before or after the Marines? Both, he said, in different ways. She almost smiled. It was a different quality of expression than Madison's almost smiles. Diaz's had more exhaustion in it, more of the weight of the job, but it was real. How is she doing, Diaz said. Actually, she's strong, Logan said. Strong isn't the same as okay. She knows that. I think she's letting herself know that. Diaz nodded. Then, you should eat something. Both of you. I'm going to send someone for food from the diner down the road, and I'm not going to frame it as a request. There's a man in the break room who's been up since. Before I called him this morning who'd appreciate the eggs, Logan said. Your chapter president? Yes. I'll make sure he's included, Diaz said. He walked away down the corridor with the particular stride of someone who has been on their feet for 14 hours and intends to be on them for several more. Logan went back to Madison's room. She was on the phone when he came in, her personal phone, which had been returned to her by a nurse who'd found it in the property bag from the ambulance. The call was brief. Logan sat in the chair and didn't listen, or tried not to, which was difficult because the room was small and Madison's voice was clear. I know, Mom, she was saying. I know, I'm fine. No, I'm serious. Call you tonight. I love you. Yes, I'll eat something. She ended the call. She looked at the phone for a moment, then at Logan. Her expression was the softer one, the one that existed below the precision and the control, the one that had only appeared at very specific moments since the bridge. My mother saw a news alert, she said. An officer injured in Cascade County. She didn't know it was me until the department called her this morning. That's a hard phone call to make, Logan said. It was a hard phone call to receive, Madison said. She stopped. Start again with the careful precision that she used when emotion was present and needed management. She was very frightened and very relieved, and then very angry in the specific way mothers get angry when they find out someone they love has been in danger. That sounds about right, Logan said. She asked who saved me, Madison said. Logan said nothing. I told her a Marine, she said. Figured that was the most accurate starting point. Something in Logan's chest moved again. The same thing that had moved when Reese had said what he said in the hallway. The something that didn't have a precise name, but had a very precise feeling, the feeling of being seen accurately without the edit, by someone who had enough information and enough honesty to see clearly. That works, he said. She wants to send a card, Madison said. Or a meal. She can't decide which. Tell her neither is necessary. I already told her that, Madison said. She's going to send both anyway. She looked at him. She's from a generation that responds to crisis with food and paper. Accepted it. Smart, Logan said. Usually, Madison said. She set the phone down on the bed beside her. She looked at her hands again, the habit of it, the grounding mechanism. Then up. Callahan told me what Okafor said, about the case moving 12 hours faster. I heard, Logan said. Does that mean something to you? Thought about it, honestly. It means the stopping mattered, he said, which I already knew. It's useful to have it confirmed, I suppose, but it's not the reason it mattered. What is? She said. You being alive, he said simply. That's the reason it mattered. Everything else is downstream of that. Madison looked at him for a long moment. The look that she'd had at the bridge, sharp, evaluating, arriving at conclusions faster than most people, but changed now, deepened by everything that had happened between then and now. I want to ask you something, she said, and I want you to answer it honestly, not carefully. Those are different things, he said. For most people they are, she said. Don't think they are for you. But I'm asking anyway. She held his gaze. What happens now? For you, when you leave here? Logan looked at the window, the afternoon light coming through it. The weight of the question, which was larger than it it appeared on the surface, was asking not just about the practical next steps, but about the whole of it, about where a night like this fit into the life of the man who'd lived it. Go back to my chapter, he said. I ride, I do the work. Keep living the way I was living before last night, which is not a bad way to live. He looked at her. Had. And I know that something happened last night that was important, that I was part of something that mattered. I'll carry that. Will it be enough? She said. It was the most direct question she'd asked him. More direct than anything on the bridge, more direct than anything in the hours since. Asked with the genuine curiosity of a person who spent a significant portion of the last 12 hours thinking about what it means that Logan Whitmore stopped on a road when he had every reason not to. Who wants to understand the interior of that fully, not just the surface of it? Thought about her question honestly. I don't need it to be more than it was, he said finally. It was enough while it was happening. That tends to be how it goes with the right things. You don't need a lot of adding on afterward. She looked at him for a long time. "Okay," she said. The word that she used when she had received information and integrated it and was ready to move forward. "Okay," he said. Outside the window, in the parking lot 3 floors below, Reese was eating eggs from a diner container that Diaz had sent down with one of the junior detectives, and the 3 chapter members were eating beside him. Junior detective was standing nearby in the careful, casual way of someone who has been told to keep an eye on a situation and has decided the situation doesn't require much keeping. The afternoon was bright and cold, the way Montana afternoons were bright and cold. In early spring, the light clear and hard and honest, the kind of light that didn't soften anything but didn't lie about anything either. And in the substation, the federal machinery was doing what federal machinery did when it had enough information and enough warrants and enough cooperative witnesses moving forward with the slow, massive certainty of something that will not be stopped because it is. Now too big to stop and too documented to redirect. Gerald Marsh was still in a conference room, still talking. Roy Cather was in federal custody 2 counties away. Phil Doran had been arrested at his home at 11:40, which was the same time that 2 of the remaining network members had made the decision that Okafor had been hoping they would make the decision to run, which produced movement, which produced data, which produced 2 additional arrests before 2 in the afternoon. The network was contracting, rapidly and irreversibly. And in a temporary hospital room in Cascade County, woman who had noticed things that needed to be noticed and a man who had stopped when stopping was the hardest choice, sat in the particular quiet that follows something enormous and existed in it together without the need to fill it because some spaces earn their silence. The door was open. Outside in the hallway, Callahan passed by once, kept moving. Diaz passed by, gave Logan a look that contained in its brevity a significant amount of information about where the investigation stood, and kept moving. The building kept working around them the way buildings keep working around, the small human moments that take place inside them, indifferent and necessary. Logan stayed. Madison rested with her eyes open. The afternoon moved toward evening with the steady indifference of time, doing what time does regardless of what has happened inside it, and what had happened inside this particular stretch of it was enough, was more than enough, was the kind of enough that would take a long time to fully account for, and that neither of the 2 people in that room was in any rush to rush. There was no rush. The worst was over. What remained was the counting of the cost and the beginning of whatever came after. 3 months passed the way recovery passes, not smoothly, not in a straight line, but in the irregular rhythm of progress interrupted by setbacks, interrupted by progress again, each cycle leaving the person slightly different than they were before it. Madison Hayes did her physical therapy in the mornings and her paperwork in the afternoons and her thinking at night, which was the part nobody scheduled, but which turned out to be where the real work happened. She thought about Miller Creek Bridge. She thought about the sequence, the call, the road, the radio going silent, the moment she'd crawled through gravel, trying to get somewhere safer, and her body had decided it was done moving. She thought about the pair of headlights that had slowed and stopped on the highway above her. She thought about raising her weapon with a shaking arm at a man she'd been trained to distrust before she knew his name. She thought about what he'd said. "I'm here because you're still alive." She had replayed those words in the particular way that the mind replays things that contain more than their surface, not obsessively, not with distress, but with the quiet attention of someone who has understood that a sentence can carry a philosophy inside it and who is still in the process of understanding the full weight of that philosophy. Brianna Torres called her on a Tuesday in the 6th week. The call came at 7 in the evening, and Madison had been expecting it for 2 weeks. Okafor had told her that Torres had been fully briefed, that she now knew what had actually happened to her 8 months ago, that she had asked for Madison's contact information and been given it with Madison's prior permission. When the phone rang and Madison saw the area code, she sat down on her couch and took one steady breath before answering. "Officer Hayes," the voice said. It was careful and controlled, and underneath the control was something raw, the sound of a person who had been carrying a wrong story for 8 months and had only recently been given the right one. "Brianna," Madison said. "Call me Madison." A pause. "Then they told me what you found, what you put together, all those months of research." Another pause. "You didn't know about me when you started. You were just looking at numbers." "I was looking at a pattern," Madison said. "The pattern had names attached to it. Yours was one of them." "Nobody else looked," Torres said. Quiet, not accusatory, the plain statement of a fact that had been sitting in her chest for 8 months. "The investigators told me it was an accident. My department told me it was an accident." "Everyone I know," Madison said. "You're the only one who looked." Madison was quiet for a moment. She thought about all the ways she could respond to that: the modest deflections, the institutional credits, the careful distributions of praise. She discarded all of them. "You deserved someone who looked," she said. "Sorry it took as long as it did." The sound that came through the phone then was brief and quickly controlled the sound of someone who had been waiting to hear a specific thing and had just heard it and was doing the work of not falling apart in response. "Thank you," Torres said. Simple, direct, exactly the right size. They talked for an hour. Not about the case, about what came after. About the particular difficulty of going back to work in an institution that had failed to protect you, and whether going back was the right choice and how you made that decision, and what it looked like to trust something that had previously been untrustworthy. Madison didn't have all the answers, she said so. But she had some of them, and she offered the ones she had with the same careful precision. She offered everything, not more than she knew, not less than she felt. The call ended. Madison sat on her couch for a long time. Then she called Logan. She had called him 4 times in 3 months. He had called her twice. The calls were not long. They were not the calls of people who had decided on a particular kind of relationship and were building it with deliberate intention. They were the calls of 2 people who had been through something together and found that the connection created by that experience was real and didn't require a category to exist inside. Answered on the second ring. "Torres called," she said. "How is she?" he said. "Better than I expected," Madison said. "Which means she's working very hard." She paused. "She knows about you. I told her there was a man who stopped when he didn't have to." She said. Madison paused again. She said she wanted to know what kind of man does that. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the accurate kind," Madison said. "Told her a man who was trained to stop and never fully unlearned it." Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that meant Logan had received something and was sitting with it rather than deflecting it. "The ceremony is in 2 weeks," Madison said. The department had announced it 4 weeks ago. Formal recognition event, 3 officers honored, including Madison, including Brianna Torres, including a third whose situation had emerged from the federal investigation as a previously undocumented incident. Callahan was being recognized for the internal investigation. Diaz alongside him. And this was the part that had been announced with a specific kind of institutional awkwardness that Madison found both understandable and somewhat infuriating. Logan Whitmore was being invited to attend in recognition of his role as a material civilian witness. Invited, not honored, not formally recognized, invited. Madison had called Voss directly when she read the announcement. The conversation had been brief and clear. "He's not a witness who attended," Madison had said. "He's the reason there's a ceremony at all. The framing needs to reflect that." Madison, Voss had said carefully, "The formal recognition of a Hells Angels member at a law enforcement ceremony is the right thing," Madison said. Not loudly. with the same flat precision she used for everything that was important enough to require it. Superintendent Voss, with respect, you know what he did. You know what the federal report says. You know that without his actions at that bridge, there is no investigation, no case, no ceremony, no conversation we are having right now. She paused. The framing needs to reflect that. Another pause on Voss's end. I'll review the ceremony program, Voss said. When the revised announcement came out, Logan's name appeared not under the witness category, but under a newly created designation of civilian commendation for extraordinary service in a critical incident. It was not a police award. It was not a military honor. It was something the department had apparently created in the 48 hours after Madison's call because no existing category fit, which Madison considered privately exactly appropriate. She told Logan about the revision on the phone the next day. He was quiet for a long moment. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know, she said. That's not why I did it. Madison. Logan, she said. You know exactly what you did that night. I know what you did. Callahan knows. Diaz knows. Voss knows. Coffer knows. The federal report knows. The only place it wasn't reflected was the ceremony program, and that was an error, and I corrected an error. She paused. That's what good cops do. A silence. Then, quietly, don't thank me, she said. Just show up. He showed up. He arrived with Reese beside him, and 3 chapter members behind them. Not a statement, not a demonstration. Just the way Logan Whitmore moved through the world when the world had asked something significant of him. The other members of his chapter had asked to come. He hadn't discouraged them. Reese had said in the parking lot of the substation 3 months ago that they wanted to be present for what came next. And this was what came next. The ceremony was in the main hall of the county municipal building, which was not a large space, but had been arranged to hold approximately 200 people, most of them in uniform. When Logan and Reese and the 3 others walked in, the room registered them the way rooms register things that require a recalibration of expectation, not hostility, not welcome, but the specific, attentive stillness of 200 people adjusting their understanding of what they were seeing. Logan looked straight ahead and kept walking. Callahan met him near the front. He extended his hand. Logan shook it. The handshake was not performative. It was the handshake of 2 men who had spent a significant night on the same side of something difficult and recognized each other for it. You look better than the last time I saw you, Callahan said. Lower bar, Logan said, true. Callahan looked at Reese, extended his hand. Reese shook it with the same straightforward quality he brought to everything. Aaron Callahan. Reese Calloway, Reese said. Thank you for what you did for him that night. He did it for himself, Callahan said. I just made sure the record reflected it accurately. Same thing, Reese said, with the flat certainty of someone who has thought about this and arrived at a conclusion he's not interested in debating. Callahan almost smiled. Then he looked past Logan toward the door, and Logan followed his gaze. Madison had come in. She was in full uniform the first time Logan had seen her in it, and the cognitive adjustment took a half second, the brain's small processing delay, when it has to update an image it has been carrying in a different form. She walked without a cane, though the physical therapist had told her she could use one if the standing became difficult, which was a suggestion she had declined with the polite firmness that characterized most of her interactions with suggestions she didn't intend to follow. She saw him immediately. Their eyes found each other across the room with the directness of people who have been through something together and whose attention in any shared space tends to move toward each other before anywhere else. She crossed toward him, and he moved toward her, and they met in the middle in the way that people meet when the path between them is unobstructed by anything other than the distance itself. You're here, she said. You told me to show up, he said. Did, she agreed. She looked at Reese, at the others. Thank you for coming, she said to Reese directly. All of you. We wanted to be here, Reese said simply, without elaboration, because no elaboration was necessary. Madison looked at Logan. In her expression was the whole of the 3 months the recovery. The calls with Torres, the conversation with Voss, the nights thinking about what it meant that a man had stopped on a road. She looked at him with all of that present and visible, in a way she'd chosen not to manage or edit. I need to tell you something before this starts, she said. All right, he said. I've been thinking about what you said, she said, that night, about how you couldn't stop yourself from stopping when someone needed help. She held his gaze. I want you to know that I think that's rare. I think most people have that impulse and learn to override it because the cost is too high, or the risk is too obvious, or the story they're in doesn't allow for it. And I think what makes you. She stopped, chose the next words with the precision she always used for things that mattered. What makes you different is that you never learned to override it, or you learned and decided not to keep learning. Logan looked at her. He didn't deflect it. He let it land exactly where it was aimed and stayed with it. Something like that, he said. I want to be like that, she said. Think I might already be a little, but I want to be more. She paused. You showed me something about what that looks like from the outside, and it's useful to know what it looks like. The room around them was filling, finding seats, arranging itself for what was about to begin. Neither of them moved toward their seats yet. You filed a report when nobody wanted you to, Logan said. You kept researching when your commander told you to stop. You built a case in a kitchen cabinet behind soup on your own time without support or authority. He looked at her steadily. You're already like that. You've been like that the whole time. Just needed the night on the bridge to know it about yourself. Madison's jaw tightened slightly, not against him, against the feeling. The particular difficulty of being seen accurately by someone who has no reason to be generous and chooses accuracy instead. Stop being right about things, she said. I can't, he said. Doesn't take. And she did the thing with the corner of her mouth. Full, not almost. The real version of it, which Logan had not seen before in full, which was different from the almost version in the way that the real version of anything is different from its approximation, not better or worse, just complete. Sit with us, she said after. When this is done, there's a dinner at the diner 2 miles from here, and Callahan already promised Diaz it would happen, and you're coming. Reese wants eggs, Logan said. Reese can have eggs, she said. The ceremony began. When Madison's name was called, and she walked to the front of the room and received her commendation from Superintendent Voss, the applause from 200 people in that room was the sustained kind, the kind that means something beyond social obligation, that carries in it the genuine feeling of a people who understand what's being recognized and want the recognition to land with the full weight of its meaning. She stood straight. She received it without diminishing it. She said thank you in the clear, direct way she said everything. When Logan's name was called, when Voss read the civilian commendation, and the words extraordinary service in a critical incident filled the room, something happened that nobody had planned for and nobody could have orchestrated. The room went quiet first, the particular quiet of 200 people taking something in. And then the applause started, and it was different from what came before, not because it was louder or longer, but because of where it came from. Not just from the civilians, not just from the officers who'd worked the investigation, from the uniformed officers who'd walked in that morning with no particular framework for what they were supposed to think about a Hell's Angel standing in their ceremony. Came from all of them. Logan walked to the front, received the commendation from Voss, who looked at him with the commendation of a woman who has updated a significant number of working assumptions in the last 3 months and considers that a reasonable outcome. Turned to face the room, and the applause continued, and he stood with it without performing anything, without false modesty, without the particular tension of someone unsure how to be seen. Just stood there and let it be what it was. Reese in the third row was not applauding. He was doing something different, sitting with his hands on his knees and his head slightly forward, and his expression, the expression of a man watching something he considers exactly right happening, exactly correctly, and who has no need to add to it. After at the diner, the table was loud and long and required 3 pushed-together sections to accommodate everyone who'd ended up included Callahan and Diaz, Madison and Torres, who had driven 3 hours to attend the ceremony and been introduced to Logan in the parking lot with a handshake that had lasted a half-second longer than handshakes usually lasted because both of them were holding more than hello inside it. Reese and the 3 chapter members. 2 of Callahan's junior detectives who had somehow transitioned from keeping an eye on the chapter members to being in genuine conversation with them over the course of the afternoon. The food was ordinary. The coffee was reliable. The conversation moved across the table in the way conversations move when the people having them have stopped performing for each other and are simply talking. Logan sat between Reese and Madison, which was not a planned arrangement and which suited him entirely. At one point, Reese leaned toward him and said quietly, "Under the general noise, you look different than you did 3 months ago." "Different how?" Logan said. "Less like a man who's been carrying something alone for too long," Reese said. Logan thought about that, looked across the table at Callahan and Diaz arguing companionably about something procedural. Torres, who was talking with one of the junior detectives with the careful but genuine quality of someone practicing trust in a context where it hadn't recently been warranted. Madison, who was listening to something Diaz was saying with her full attention and that expression she had when she was absorbing information and sorting it efficiently. "Maybe," Logan said. "Not maybe," Reese said. "I know you. I've known you 11 years, not maybe." Logan said nothing for a moment. Then, "All right, not maybe." Reese nodded once and went back to his eggs. Madison caught Logan's eye across the table. She raised her coffee cup slightly, not a toast, just an acknowledgement. The small communication of two people who have learned to speak at low volume. Logan raised his in return. The night outside was clear and cold in the way Montana nights were clear and cold, complete, unambiguous, the kind of dark that was honest about being dark. And inside the diner, 200 yards from where the ceremony had taken place, a table of people who had come to that room from different directions and different lives and different sides of a line that had seemed uncrossable were having dinner together, and the conversation was real, and the coffee was hot. The thing that had brought them there, the terrible night that had cost so much and revealed so much and changed the understanding of so many people in that room, had become, without anyone deciding it should, the foundation of something that felt like the beginning of a different kind of normal. Logan had not stopped on that road to create this. He had stopped because a person needed help, and stopping was what you did. It's this table, this noise, this particular configuration of people who would not have been in the same room without the choice he'd made on a dark highway at midnight. This was what stopping had built. And it was enough. More than enough. It was the whole point. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for a reason large enough to justify the courage they already carry inside them. Logan Whitmore had not waited. He had not calculated. He had not asked whether the moment was worthy of the risk. Simply seen a person who needed help and made the only choice that his life and his training and his character had left him capable of making. Because he did. Because one man on one road on one cold night in Montana refused to drive past what mattered. 17 people were in federal custody. 3 officers had their real story back. Network that had operated in the dark for 8 months was dismantled. And 200 people in a municipal hall in Cascade County had stood and applauded a man in a Hell's Angels vest and understood, for perhaps the first time, that courage does not come in approved packaging. It comes from people who show up when showing up is hard. It comes from people who stop when every reasonable voice says keep driving. It comes from people like Logan Whitmore, who had never needed a ceremony to know what he was, but who deserved one anyway, and got it.